Hello and welcome to Matters of the Heart. I am Gabriel Gonsalves, professional heart intelligence coach, teacher, and trainer. I help people create relationships, lifestyles, and careers that they absolutely love. And I do this by showing you how to access your inner resources of love, wisdom, and power that become available to you when you start connecting with your emotional, intuitive, energetic, and spiritual heart. Through individual and group coaching programs, online courses, and live seminars, I teach a wholehearted approach to personal and spiritual development, emotional mastery, and conscious relationship building. Basically, I'm here to help you give birth to the most amazing, loving, wise, and powerful version of you. You can find out more about me and the work that I've been called to do in this world by visiting my website, heartintelligencecoach.com, where you will be able to book a session with me and find out more about my upcoming seminars. Today in Matters of the Heart, we're going to be talking to Gary Roe. He is the author of numerous books, including the award-winning bestsellers Shattered, Surviving the Loss of a Child, Please Be Patient, and Grieving, and Heartbroken, Healing from the Loss of a Spouse. He's a writer, encourager, hope bringer, and a follower of the teachings of Christ. His mission is fourfold. First, to connect with others as a fellow struggler in the battle of life. Second, to help others heal from the wounds of the past. Third, to assist others in discovering who they are. And finally, to inspire others to engage in the purpose that God has for them. I hope you enjoy today's conversation. Welcome to Matters of the Heart, Gary. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. So, as I was going through your website, there was so much resonance in what I read, not only with regards to your history, being a chaplain, being a missionary, your journey with dealing with death and loss since a very early time in your childhood, but I found a kindred spirit, someone who, like me, has also dedicated their life to helping heal the heart, to comfort the brokenhearted. And so I'm very excited to be connecting with you, and then also have so many questions for you. But I love it if you can, if you can just share with our audience a little bit about your background and in your own words, what really truly got you to become somebody who is dedicated to helping people heal their hearts, who has dedicated their life to caring for people's hearts.
Oh, Gabriel, thank you. I think, the biggest thing is, well, not the biggest thing, but I guess in terms of my story, I lost large chunks of my childhood to the evil of sexual abuse. The perpetrators were very close to me. It was frequent, multiple perpetrators, and it happened over a number of years, early in childhood. And I'm one of those people that, because the people were so close to me, I completely blocked the memories of that until I was probably 45 or 46 years old. And then they began flooding back in terms of flashbacks, both when I was awake and when I was asleep. But that was the early loss in my life. I lost 3 or 4 grandparents very early. My brother, I have one brother, and he's 14 years older than I am. And so he was experiencing a lot of losses of high school friends in accidents, friends in the Vietnam War. And I was around for those announcements. I picture myself now, we had this pool table in our living room. And during these, quote, adult conversations, when I should have been in my room, asleep or in bed, I was often hiding under the pool table where no one could see me, hearing all of this. And I just remember this sort of cloud of I'll call it a cloud. It was kind of like a heavy atmosphere of grief that would just permeate the room. My family was certainly not the worst family on the planet, certainly not the best family on the planet. My parents' marriage was very volatile. There was a lot of anger in our home. And as a result of that, I wasn't really surprised when my parents eventually separated and divorced. Long about that time, I was in junior high school. Long about that time, I lost a best friend to spinal meningitis over the Christmas holidays. One of those sudden things where I saw him and talked with him the last day before Christmas break and then never ever saw him again. And after my parents' divorce, I did the typical thing of living with my mom. But my mom was, unknowns to anybody really, she had been slipping into mental illness for quite some time. We didn't really know what to do with that back in the 70s. I'm not sure we know what to do with it now. But anyway, back then they committed her to a psychiatric hospital, and I went and lived with my dad for a while. That was a great time. 6 months of living with my dad. And then one Sunday, he just dropped of a heart attack right in front of me in our apartment. And he was transported to the hospital, and he never regained consciousness, and he died a week later. So I went back, and another piece of the puzzle is that I got to sit there with my brother and nod agreement to machines being unplugged, because we knew my dad, well, there was no opportunity for life. There was no brain activity. But still, that ended up being an important event in my life, just the decision to unplug my father. I moved back in with my mother. She was in a worse state than before. She made a suicide attempt, which landed her back in a mental hospital for a little while as an inpatient. And I kind of fell through the cracks. CPS, Child Protective Services in the United States, was not what it is now. And I lived on my own in that apartment. I don't know how.
How old were you then?
I was 15. I was 15. The good thing is I was a competitive swimmer. I liked school and was a good student. So my entire world consisted of swimming, school, studying, and good, solid friends. I just happened to be connected to some good, solid people, or I don't know what would have happened. Finally, my best friend and his father showed up at my door one day, and they said, enough of this. We want you to come live with us. And I packed a couple of bags. My mom got out of the hospital. She took me over there and dropped me off on the front step and rang the doorbell. And this is one of those scenes that's still embedded in my mind. The entire family, they had 4 kids, so there was 6 of them total. They opened the door, and my mom said, "Well, here's Gary. I'm going to Vegas." And she turned around and got in the car and drove off. And that was the last time I saw her for a number of years. And so, life is not what I thought it would be. This is very different than what I expected. And I thought, if I'm going to get hit like this, then I better learn how to take the hit. And I better learn how to figure this out and begin to heal so that I can grow, or else I'm really history and I'm in trouble. And I think I knew that on some level, even though I couldn't have expressed it to you like this when I was 15. Mm-hmm. Somehow I knew that. And I didn't know what to do about that. But this new family that took me in really embraced me and loved me as a son. And 3 years in their household really nurtured me, and I think I began to heal. Mm-hmm. During that period of time, I noticed that I was starting to almost intuitively reach out to other high schoolers around me who were hurting. That really launched me. That when I went into college, I found myself majoring in psychology. I found myself surrounded by hurting people. And basically ever since, I've been on this journey to heal. But part of that journey of healing for me is closely wedded to helping other people heal and grow. Because I think we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think that it's impossible for me to heal in the best ways without extending myself to others and helping them heal and grow too.
Yeah.
So I guess it's not surprising that I found myself in ministry, spent a number of years as a college minister, then a number of years as a church starting missionary in Japan. Then I came back to the States. I was honestly burned out on ministry and ended up in the Hawaiian Islands for 3 years, but still managed to be involved with hurting people even when I didn't want to be. And then I ended up back in Texas and pastored 3 churches over a number of years, about 20 years or so. And now the last 9 years, I've been involved strictly in the death and dying and hospice realm as a hospice chaplain, grief counselor, author, and speaker. So, our world is full of wounded hearts. Each one of us has one.
Yep.
And goodness, I think at any juncture we really have a choice. Do we want to keep on wounding others' hearts and our own hearts, or do we want to do something different? Do we want to be part of some kind of healing solution for ourselves and others?
Yeah. I can certainly relate to what you just said. You can just be another wounded heart, wounding more hearts, or you can choose to wake up to to your own wounds. As you said, the majority of us are walking around with wounds we don't even know we have, and
we don't.
And in the case of victims of sexual abuse, and I count myself as well because I was also sexually abused as a youngster by also people very close to me and my family. I know what it feels like to have completely blocked these memories and these feelings from my awareness, and then wake up to them many years later. And I've also realizing in my work and the kind of emotional healing work that I do, that is the experience of many people, not only with sexual abuse, but with all other kinds of traumas as well that happen very early in your childhood. Tell me, what do you think it's ultimately, what does the healing, what brings about the healing in people's hearts?
Wow, what a question. I think, and I could say here, I count myself a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. I always like to say with the caveat that, oh my gosh, that does not mean I'm perfect. In fact, that means the opposite. Mm-hmm. It means I'm anything but. And I believe that real healing, lasting healing, in some shape or fashion, comes from God. Now, I believe that God is so good that He can bring healing to people that never credit Him for the healing, people that never realize that He is involved in the healing, because He's just big and He's loving and He's gracious and He's generous, and so He does that for us. I also believe, however, when I say that, is that I don't believe healing can take place. I shouldn't say that. I don't believe God brings healing to people without other people being involved in that person's healing. And He's connected us. The minute we are born, we find ourselves a part of a relational web, as it were. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like if I could view a web where each strand of the web is kind of a pipe that carries information and nutrients, as it were. And it goes from person to person and it intermixes with all the others. And, they often say most of us are the composite of of the 5 people we're around the most.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about the truth of that. However, I do firmly believe that we are relational beings, that we were created and designed for relationship. So if that's the case, it makes sense to me that real healing takes place in the context of some relationship or relationships somewhere. And I don't believe that healing is possible unless the person with the wounded heart has some sense of safety. And so I think safety is a real prerequisite, because without safety, we just don't trust. We don't open up. We don't go anywhere. And the shame is that most of us grow up as a result of our wounds and hits, being pretty suspicious and critical. And
in the work that I do, I like you. I believe that the if we were going to call it a battle, it has to. I believe it has to be fought in three fronts. One, I call it the individual. We have to develop the inner awareness to, or the self awareness to become aware of our feelings. Develop tools and practices that will allow us to feel our pain, surrender our pain, and then also be able to have a dialogue, some kind of a process of self-inquiry to connect and have a conversation with that pain. And then also, like you, that it also has to be done in relationship with others, creating that safe space for one another. That is what that family did for you when they took you in for those 3 years. They created a safe container where you could heal. And then the third front is in the spiritual realm, at the level of spirit, whether if you want to use, call God or call Christ or Mother Mary or the Buddha or Buddha's compassion or just simply love or divine love, whatever it is, but whatever it is, your version of divine love and what that, and its source that you summon, that you call upon it to bring about that healing. Definitely, as you say in your website, healing is not for sissies. Healing is not for sissies. I love that. Why do you believe that?
I was about to make a comment that I really liked what you said about I'm going to call it the battlefront. I really do believe that life is a war. That sounds kind of negative, but that it's a war for our hearts. And that, like you said, we have to take responsibility over, our own hearts and pursue healing. And healing is messy. As you said, it involves, to some degree, embracing and feeling the pain. In other words, being real and authentic, part of being real and authentic is actually feeling what's happening. And in some cases, going back and attempting to feel, and I believe that that's possible. I believe it's very possible to feel what happened in the past, because that is what integrates us. Without that, there's a piece of us left back there, and maybe a big piece of us left back there. And so, goodness, I don't know what you think, Gabriel, but we tend to run from pain just naturally. I mean, who likes to feel pain, right? But somehow being willing to feel the pain in order to get through the pain and past the pain is a necessary thing. And often that's a messy process. I could look at my own life and say, there seem to be seasons for me where it's a period of intense healing from some of my wounding. Thankfully, it doesn't happen all the time at the same level of intensity, because I'd never make it. I would never survive that. But it seems to come in seasons, and the heaviest seasons, to be honest, were hard, messy, confusing, painful, and I really needed a few really safe people around me to assure me that I was on the right road. Because, when things are messy, when we're not working out the way we envision that they should work out, or when the pain is deeper than we anticipated, our tendency is to doubt ourselves and to doubt the whole process, and to just say, you know what, I think I'd rather go back into the matrix. Or I think I would rather deaden this pain somehow so that I don't have to feel this.
Yeah.
So I think healing, especially deep healing from deep wounds, is a really messy process. And because of that, I think a person has to really want it, and I think they have to commit to it. And that's scary. That's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that we live in a society that it's almost like designed to keep us, as you said, in the matrix. But in essence, what that means to me is keep us distracted or numb from our pain, entertaining us to death, keeping us busy with social media, all kinds of distractions, keeping us from feeling the pain. It's a mechanism of control, without a doubt. Is what really drives the entire entertainment industry. I worked in the film industry for many years. And I get that. I remember very vividly, for me, one of the most painful moments in my life was sitting or spending a whole year with my mother as she was going through chemo. When I was living in Los Angeles, and she came to live with me. And I remember that I was so disconnected from my fear of death at that moment. And but looking back, I remember that is when I began to start binging and watching porn like I never had before. My mom would take this very heavy medicine that would completely knock her out at night. And I remember I couldn't go to sleep. And I would just watch porn. Literally, she was passed out in a bed right next to me, and I'll be watching porn for the whole evening. And at that time, I just wasn't aware that, that what I was doing was actually distracting. I would just rationalize it by saying, well, this is just entertainment, and it's just keeping my mind off my mom. But looking back, what I was doing was I was just numbing my pain and not really not really connecting to the fear, the fear of loss, and then obviously on all that came with it. And if someone who might be listening to us who knows that they have wounds to heal, they have a wounded heart, that is thinking about, I know I have to deal with this wound, this thing that may have happened in my childhood, or these memories or these dreams that are starting to come back to me. What would you suggest, would be the baby step that they could take in the direction towards their healing? The baby step, not the one where they saying like, okay, I'm going to dive that in. That's a little bit more like me. Which basically means I'm going to jump in the wrong relationship with the wrong person that is ultimately the right person that's going to trigger my wounds, and I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to split my heart in half and go like a deep diver to go look for these wounds.
Yes, we don't. I don't know if we're worse at this when we used to be. Maybe we were always bad. Maybe we were always bad at the step-by-step, baby step approach. Because, now, gosh, if it takes more than 0.0001 for my webpage to load,
Sure.
And so that trickles down to my view of healing too, without me even knowing it. That anything of value, gosh, I ought to be able to have that quick. So I will share the first thing that pops to mind, and this really comes from my own life, is to begin to get some time of solitude or alone time, whatever we want to call it, where all the devices are in another room or all the devices are off. And I personally think in terms of a baby step, it doesn't have to be long, because we're not used to being long without a device. We're not used to, something bleeping at us, something demanding our attention. And just taking a moment and beginning to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, paying attention only to our breathing and staying right where we are in the moment for just a moment. And I think if a person is willing to try that and then is willing to begin to practice that once a day, and let's just say baby steps, 1 or 2 minutes, baby step. I think the desire for more peace and solitude like that will come. And now what does that have to do with healing? Well, I think that the noisier our life is, the more we're probably not going to be able to decipher the messages that we really need to hear. We're just going to be hearing the messages that are thrown at us the loudest and the most frequently. So getting quiet helps us realize a little bit, I might be bombarded by all these messages, but I don't have to listen to all of them. And I really don't need to pay attention to most of them, probably. And I need to be discerning and wise, whatever that might mean, about what messages I allow to come in and to begin to take up residence in my heart. I think most of our issues come from what I would call unfiltered messages just being allowed to come in our eyes, our minds, our hearts, and we just let them dwell there, and we don't realize the impact of those things until months or years down the road when we're involved in behaviors and we blink and we say, how did I get here? Well, we didn't get there overnight, and it didn't happen quickly. I believe it happened one little message at a time. And the other thing,
it goes back to what you were saying earlier, that you really see the work that we're doing in many ways as a battle for our hearts that have been hijacked and somehow by culture or society, obviously greater powers that are interested in keeping people numb and entertained to death.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the next thing I would say is I am very big on journaling. I guess that's not surprising since I'm a writer, but I know that a lot of people, and especially guys, aren't really into journaling. That does not sound appealing to them. But having said that, just being able to write down on a sheet of paper what's going on in my heart and mind at the moment forces all those other noises out. Puts a block up against them, slows down my mind and my heart long enough to actually concentrate on one thing. And as I begin to write what's going on inside me and just be real with myself, I think a lot of healing can happen over time. It's one of those things where, how would I put this? I get that. I used to get this question all the time as a pastor. I'd say, well, I don't know about reading my Bible every day because, you see, I hardly ever remember what I read. I can't tell you what I read this morning. I can't tell you what I read last week. I can't tell you what I read last month. And after a while, I had this brainstorm, and I would ask the person and ask myself, so what did you have for lunch 2 weeks ago on Wednesday? And they would stare at me. I don't know. And I'd say, well, what did you have for dinner 2 weeks ago on Thursday? I don't know. I said, but you're here alive and have some measure of health because of all the meals that you have eaten that you no longer remember, right? They'd say, right. I said, now you remember a few meals that were really good, right? And they say, right. Well, you probably remember a few Bible passages that really stuck out. But that little bit of intake, I'll call it intake, that little bit of inflow or intake every day by journaling, you think that's outflow, but in my mind, you're really investing in yourself, and it's really inflow. Can make a big difference. It might be a drop in the bucket, but you do that every day for 2 years. That's, over 720 drops in that bucket now, and it can really add up.
Right. So you're saying in essence that it really is beginning to build sort of the self-awareness muscle through some kind of a journaling.
Yes.
Yeah. Through some kind of a journaling process where you spend time with yourself and you begin to sort of, just express these thoughts, these feelings through your pen.
That's an excellent way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. What about someone who is not aware that they're wounding, that they have some healing to do, and who may be in denial? Somebody who might say, "Well, there's nothing wrong. I had a happy childhood. There was nothing wrong. My parents were just normal people." Which you hear a lot about. What? Not how to go about the healing, because obviously they're not in that space. But what are some of the questions they can ask themselves that would help them know or discover what their healing or what their wounding might be?
Oh my. Well, you're absolutely right. If they're not in that space, I have a friend who said, "I will always deny what I am not prepared to accept."
Sounds like me.
whatever that is, and so the question is really, okay, how do we help someone who we know has been, well, everyone has been wounded? How do we help them begin to see that, yes, we all need healing, including me, and how do I go about that? Gosh, that is a great question. One of the questions I like to ask people, I'm sure, and when I ask this question, most of the time I get a blank stare, like I am an alien from outer space, because I tend to interject it when it's not really expected. Either that, or I get this response like, "Oh, well, yeah," like the person should know the answer to this question, but when push comes to shove, they don't. And the question is this: why are you here? And not, why are you here in this room? I'm here to eat lunch with you, or whatever the case might be. But no, why are you on the planet? What is the reason for your existence? And do you think it would be pretty important for you to know the answer to that question? Because if you don't know the answer to that question, then that would mean potentially that your entire life is either there is no rhyme or reason, so it's really meaningless anyway, or you could be missing something tremendously important. And, part of that is, I think, really asking them, who are you, really? I know that in the United States of America, when you ask someone who they are, they immediately hear the question, what do you do for a living? So they say, well, I'm an author, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a nurse. But that's what we do. And when the thing that we do goes away, because it will, sometime, where does that leave us? And that's why so many people go through, I think, multiple identity crises throughout life. Is a job ends and they wonder who they are now. Or they lose a part of their health and they wonder who they are now. Or they lose a spouse and they wonder who they are now. So those two questions for me, why are you here? And then, well, who are you? Who are you really? Because the answer to those two questions needs to be bigger, theoretically speaking, bigger than anything that you and I could ever encounter in life.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, I had a mentor once who said, give a man or a woman a big enough why, and they can endure any what. And I thought, I like that. I would rephrase it and say, you give us a big enough why, and we can heal from any what.
Yeah, the why. Yeah, the bigger the why, the bigger the motivation.
Yes.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Can you can a person do the healing for another person?
No. That's just an initial reaction. No.
No.
I don't. I don't think that's the way it works.
No.
I think, and to say again from my theology that we're all created in the image of God and we're designed for relationship
Yeah.
together. We are not robots, and this is a very dynamic process of life and relationship. So anything that sets me apart to where I'm alone, where I can heal myself, anybody that could claim that, you and I could probably point out 30 other people involved in that process, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
it did not happen in a vacuum,
Yeah.
and it did not happen just for them alone. So
Right.
no, I don't think they can do that for themselves exclusively.
Right. I often like to think that when because there's a lot of people that use a lot of spiritual principles to basically say no, I'll pray for their healing and I know God will heal them and their name and they'll wake up heal. Unlike you, I say, well, I think it's a lot more that is not as simple as that. There is the prayers will go out, but it will not necessarily be in the way that you think or you're directing it. It will happen. It will be a much more complicated process, and in which the healing will happen. There are so many factors involved. What would you? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's it. No.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who might be in a relationship? Let me give you a little bit of context to my question. I believe that one of the ways I discovered my wounding was by having those wounds triggered in my relationships. Like I have funny enough, I actually cut myself today in this finger where I have a scar. I got bitten by a small dog. There's something you should never ever do is like try to break a dog fight. Learn the wrong way. Why? Because you'll get bitten. But anyway, there's two dogs. One of them bit me and I nearly lost my finger. But when the skin grew, and as you know, if you've had scars, the skin is different. The scar tissue is different. And not only that, but you develop a different kind of sensitivity in the skin, especially when there's nerve damage, as it happened in this wound. And so I believe that, again, because it's been my experience that the wounds that I've had get triggered in my relationships when somebody doesn't do something that I expect them to do, or treats me in a way that is not loving or respectful or honoring or whatever. Sometimes, more often than not, out of stupid little things that may even seem irrelevant, but somehow really get deep down inside of me. And for me, those are all signs. There's something within myself that needs some healing. And so it is in our relationships. I believe that I have discovered where my wounding is. And so let's say if you are someone who's listening, there's someone listening to us and they're working on their wounding because they know they're in a process like you. They've decided not to be a sissy anymore and decided I'm going to start, embracing these aspects of myself that, as you said earlier, was left behind at some point in the past. But they have a partner. They have a partner that they know needs a healing. They have a husband or a wife or maybe even a child that they know, did healing. What can they do? What's the best thing that they can do to support the other person? Do they force them into healing? Do they take them somewhere? Do they have a conversation with them? Especially, what do they do if the other person is resistant?
What a great question. I know I keep saying that, but it really is, these are great, great, great questions. Um, I I can't tell you the number of emails I have received over the years from a husband telling me from a wife telling me how her husband needs to grow and heal from his wounds. Or I get, an email from a mom saying how a daughter should, or a daughter saying how a mom or dad should. And one of my standard responses is usually, well, I'm here. Feel free to give them my name. Feel free to give them my website. Let's see if they contact me. And maybe in one and out of 100 cases, they will. I believe healing is something you have to want. I don't believe that we can really lead anybody to healing. However, having said that, I guess I better say I don't think you can push anybody to healing. Perhaps we can lead them, but we can't push them. So what would leading them toward that look like? I think the best we can do is to provide an environment where they can, over time, discover that they need healing. Now, what in the world does that look like? Well, I think the number one thing is that, let's say person A knows that they're wounded and they are seeking healing and they're healing. And person B is still in denial about all of that. The best thing that person A can do is focus on person A and to heal the best that they can in the process. I believe so much of life is like modeling. And here my theology comes back in here again, where, Jesus chose disciples. He just didn't deal with multitudes all the time. He spent most of his time with 12 people. And even with 12 people, he spent even more time with 3 of those 12. And these guys were following him everywhere, watching what he did. And yes, he was teaching them all the time, but I think the real power came from the fact that he was modeling for them how to heal, how to love, how to approach people, how to pray. All of those things he was modeling for them. So if the person who's in healing can focus on themselves, not worry about the other person so much, and say, to the best of my ability, I'm going to heal and continue healing, and trust that over time, that healing is contagious. And it often is. However, I say that, and you can probably attest to examples too, of sometimes that triggers the other person and they really don't want to heal. They just don't want to go there. And that is a very difficult scenario, because what you've got is, because of healing, which is incredibly positive, and because of a denial of wounds, which is what we could say natural and negative in this case, distance begins to appear between these people. And that's just hard. It's just flat hard. But even in that case, I think the best thing that person A, the healing person, can do is continue to walk the road of healing. It is really the only good road there is.
Yeah.
All other roads, as you said, they're blinds. They lead around a corner you can't see to a bed of nothing, and then you have to backtrack.
Yeah. So you're saying in essence that if you have, or you're in a relationship with someone, a spouse, a child, or coworker that needs healing, the best thing you can do for them is to actually heal yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, and the best thing you can probably do for the world. Ultimately, it's one of the reasons why we're here. I was watching. I've been watching this series on Netflix called The Alienist, and it's a series that takes place in the early 1800s in London, with this guy who is trying to understand the mind of these serial killers and people who are, at that time, deviates, what you would normally call deviates. and they're alienated from society. So the alienists were people who were trying to understand what it was that would make these people aliens, basically.
Mm.
And one of the things that the main character says at one point is that he was basically saying something along the lines on, obviously I'm paraphrasing, the broken, wounded aspect of us is irresistibly drawn to the wounded, broken aspects of other people. And so, chances are that the majority of us are also drawn or in relationship to people who have similar wounds to ours, or sometimes complementary wounds. What I mean by that is that wounds that sort of complement each other.
Mm.
You know, like somebody was one of the persons was actually wounded by a parent who was very aggressive, who was very active and big, and the other one was actually wounded by the opposite, by a parent who was not there at all, who was absent. And so we come together to help each other heal. My experience is that once the healing happens in one, it will either inspire the other person to heal, because think about like what brought us together is no longer keeping us together anymore. So when I see you happy and joyful, doing what you want to, I'll, at some point, like you said, that will inspire me to also want to be happy as well. Or like you just said a little while ago, I'll just run away. The other person will just simply leave, because the distance will become so big that it will be really hard for them to be able to meet somewhere in a halfway point.
Yeah.
Do you believe that we ever finish the healing work? Is it ever done?
No. I believe we're always in process. If we could finish the healing work, then we could say, I guess we're done, right? We're done. And if we said we're done, and we could say, well, I'm done with my own healing now, so now I can help other people. Well, if you're really done with your healing, then you're no longer human. And so your ability to help other hurting people is going to go way down. I think the best phrase is that I'm healing, and no matter how far I progress, I'm not quite healed completely. And plus, if we ask the question, what would healed even look like? Most of us think it would be perfect, right? It would be perfect. Well, that's not going to happen in this life. And we are going to continue to encounter, probably until our last breath in some shape, form, or fashion, if we're honest, we're going to encounter what I call the arrows of life. They're going to be shot. Some randomly, some purposefully at us. We're going to get hit. And so healing and things like forgiveness and release of pain, feeling the pain, release of pain, are really a human condition on this planet. We will be forever involved in that.
Yeah. Is that, by the way, what you referred to in your website when you talked about you talk about 5 things that you wholeheartedly believe, and one of them is that we're all designed for impact. Does that mean like we're designed to get hit?
That's a good point.
Yeah, like the mannequins, those mannequins that are like crashing. Yes. Like, are we designed for that kind of impact? Because when I read that on the website, I was wondering, does he mean like we're here to make an impact in the life of other people, or does he mean like we're designed to get hit, like bumping?
That's a good question. I probably need to go on my website and clarify that. We will. I mean, we will get hit. We know that. But the statement there is, I believe we are all so important. We are far more important than any of us realize. That is not designed to give us a big head. In fact, that's designed to humble us, to seek, why am I here? And I am here to contribute. I am here to make a difference. I am here to make an impact. And I believe we make the biggest impact when we ourselves decide to heal. And a part of that process, I mean, one of the things that the word that I use a lot, I actually say I believe every issue in life is a grief issue. And again, people look at me like I'm nuts, but every struggle or issue we have in life ultimately comes from a real or perceived loss in our life. We have been disappointed. Our expectations have been blown. We've been wounded. All of those things are losses. And grief is certainly not just about death. And so really healing means learning to grieve well. And as we learn to really, really grieve well, then we learn to live well. And as we learn to live well, then we can really make far more of an impact in a positive way than any of us ever thought was possible for little old us.
Sure. Yeah, it's very powerful what you just said. In your experience as a hospice chaplain, experiencing people who are basically undergoing the ultimate healing, which is obviously our reunion with our creator and our source, where we once again become whole at some level, at least at the spiritual level. What are in your experience are the regrets that most people have when they are getting close to their final moments of their lives?
I have yet to hear a regret from a hospice patient that does not involve a relationship or another person in some shape, form, or fashion. It's really all the regrets are relational. They're about what I wish I'd said, what I wish I hadn't said, what I wish I'd done, what I wish I hadn't done. Even if they reference missed opportunities in life as big regrets, you dig a little bit, and that's really still about people. It's about the relationships they were involved in at the time. It wasn't about a business deal. It wasn't about financial success. And, I have never had anybody say to me, I wish I'd worked harder. I wish I'd earned more money. Now, all those things might be true, but that's not what they're telling me at that stage. They are saying the real priorities. They're really revealing who they are. I'm a relational being. I was created for a relationship. And you know what? All of my pain, frustration, regrets in life come from relationships, some shape, form, or fashion. So it can be anything from estrangements. It can be anything. You wouldn't believe the smallest thing. Small things become really big things in people's hearts, and they carry them around in their mental and heart suitcase for years. And they add little bricks to that suitcase all the time. And before they know it, they are carrying 20 suitcases, and they've gotten used to the weight over time. And they think, well, this is just me. And this is just the way life is. Personally, I refuse to buy that. I think a person at any time can lay down one suitcase, open it up with a little help, perhaps, and say, let's look at the bricks in here. Do we really need this stuff? And if we don't need it, how in the world do we begin to offload it? So a lot of my job as a hospice chaplain is helping people transact unfinished business, especially with people who are no longer present. They're halfway across the world, or they themselves have already died, and they're not going to show up at the end of the bed for them to make amends to. And I also consider that one of the greatest privileges I have as a human being is to be present for the transacting of some of that business. It is absolutely astounding the weights we will carry, and it's absolutely astounding what can happen when we're willing to let them go.
Powerful. Beautiful as well. Very insightful. You certainly got me connected with relationships right now in my life where closure hasn't come, complete. There are things unsaid.
Me too. Me too.
Sitting with, It is part of the human condition, isn't it? And
Yes, it
and
is.
it is part of the journey. Gee, I sure wish we had more time. And your time is already coming to an end. Um, what kind of person are you most passionate working with? And if they're listening to us, how can they find out more about you?
I think I'm most passionate about working with people who, um, they want to heal. They want to learn to grieve well, um, and they're willing to do the work. Even though I say that, and nobody really knows what that looks like until you're in it, because it's never the same for anyone. There are no checklists. There are no surefire roads to this, because it's all relational and it's all a dynamic process. People can get in touch with me very simply by going to my website. It's Gary Roe, GaryRoe.com. I have a number of free resources there on my website. Please feel free to take a look at those, see if any of them resonates or seems to resonate with where you're at. If you have a question, just go to the contact part of the menu, go to the Contact Gary box, write a question, send me an email. I try to get back to those as quickly as I can and answer whatever questions I can. I think I'm most passionate about working with people who know this is not a quick fix, that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and I'm interested today in taking whatever little step I can toward healing, knowing that life is really 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, but that's okay, because after a week, I'm 7 steps forward. And after 2 weeks, I'm 14 steps forward. And after 3 years, who knows? I'm very passionate about working with people who have been sexually abused in their past, because I can relate to that, empathize with that. And also people who have encountered significant losses in their life, whether they be deaths or other losses, because I am very passionate about helping people grieve well. And that's really what all my books are about. They're not psychological textbooks. They're very down to earth, easy to read, practical. I begin trying, if I can't connect with your heart in the book, toss it, forget it. Because if we're not at the heart level, then no healing is going to happen. So the books are really designed for that.
Okay, wonderful. Yes. Well, I know that you're an author of 8 books, so there's plenty of resources in your website. Again, the website is GaryRoe.com, where you can download a free book, The Hole in My Heart, that is designed to ask you some key questions to help you identifying the core wounding of your heart. Gary, I found our conversation really lovely, really beautiful. You're a very loving, compassionate man. I can feel already the kind of safe space. You heal. You heal. Yeah, you provide for people to heal. I can feel that. I can feel the enormity of your heart all the way out here in Cape Town through this medium. So I feel very inspired by this conversation. And one of the things I'm taking away with me is, the importance of our relationships to do our healing. That really life is a relational phenomena. When you spoke about the end of our lives being a place or a time where most people's regrets are always around relationship, has really brought me closer to those intimate relationships where they're still unresolved. And so I want to thank you for that, for having done that for me. Any last thoughts, last words you want to leave our listeners of Matters of the Heart with?
A couple of phrases. They're not unique to me. They're both mentors in college told me this. One said, life is full of losses. It's not so much what happens to you, but how you interpret and respond to what happens to you that matters. That's the first thing. It's how you interpret and how you respond to what happens that matters. The second thing is this. It's not so much what I did, but what I do next that matters most now. So what do I do next? I did that. Yep. Okay. but what do I do next?
Yeah. Beautiful. Sounds like something.
And thank you. This has been a delight. I thank you for doing this. Thank you for being there. Thank you for being who you are. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I was just going to say that what you were saying earlier about what you do next reminded me of what Maya Angelou once said when she said, "When you know better, you do better." So if you're listening, then you have remember something that you already knew about relationships, about your wounding, about how to heal. Now that you know better, then do better. Take that next necessary step, whatever that may be for you, whether that's sitting by yourself with a journal and creating a safe space for yourself, or having someone like Gary or myself hold a safe space for you, or attending a workshop or a support circle of some form. There are places that are dedicated to hold a sacred safe space where you can open up your heart. There are many people doing this work. And so take that necessary step, whatever that may be for you, now that you know a little bit more about the process, and that ultimately remember that true healing happens at the level of the heart, and it happens through the unconditional love of God. Thank you very much, Gary. It's been a treat.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Connecting with you. All right.
I look forward
to speaking again with you at some point. I'd love it if we can speak, go maybe a little bit more in depth about healing the core wounds from sexual abuse is one of the areas that I know a lot of people have suffered and being wounded in. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about the process from your experience, and what are some of the things that people should be aware of along the journey of healing their core wounds in their sexual being and identity. All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Matters of the Heart. I want to thank everybody again for lending us your hearts and your ears. And both Gary and I, from his home in Texas, my home here in Cape Town, we send you all of our love. Bye-bye for now.